Hey gang, welcome again. Glad you had a chance to join me here on Blackboard on YouTube video. We are going to continue our discussion in NPR, and we are on forecasting tonight. So we're in section 2. There'll be 8 classes. This is section 2, forecasting, and forecasting is probably my favorite session of all NPR. Love forecasting. Used to be a professional forecaster for a couple years. Very rewarding job. A lot of pressure on you to make a certain call, and we'll talk about some of the techniques. We will talk about just the forecasting process in general, and you talk about mathematical techniques and qualitative techniques too. We'll hit all that. We'll probably break it up in a couple of videos, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Just a couple of general notes about forecasting is you really don't want to forecast unless you have to. It's kind of a last resort. We talked a lot about make to order. It's a lot easier to plan a make to order. You've got firm orders in there. There's no guessing. So forecasting, you just don't want to do it unless you have to. But we're talking about strat plans, long-term plans. So almost every company has to do a forecast. You're going at least a year, 5 years out sometimes, and most people have to forecast in the near term too. Some don't, but anyway, we'll talk a little bit about forecasting in general. We're going to talk about just continue on with NPR. We're going to talk about forecasting at different levels, high levels, medium levels, and lower levels of planning. So we'll hit all those levels of planning. Again, we're going to break it up in a couple. Hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll jump right in. I'm not going to go over the objectives. If you're following on in your book, you can continue on. We'll just jump right in with the page that says Demand Forecasting Concepts. So there's you can look at it a couple different ways. There's a forecasting framework, and that is where you're going to be talking about different levels of manufacturing planning control, how you forecast at the very top management level and all the way to the daily control level. So that's the forecasting framework. Now, managing the forecast, we're going to talk about who's going to be responsible for that forecast, the length of the forecast, the horizon, how is it going to change, is it going to roll, how is it going to roll over time, forecasting process, is it going to be a qualitative process, is it going to be quantitative, what kind of model are you going to use. So those are all things we're going to talk about here probably in this first video, and the second video we'll break down and talk just very, very specifically about techniques and more math in the second one. So again, I hope you guys enjoy it. Forecasting framework. Let's look at how forecasts differ from different levels of the environment or planning environment. So at the very top, you got strat planning and business planning. That's strat planning is like a 5-year plan, business plan like a 1 to 2 year plan. And so at that level, your executive involvement, they are, that's their plan, right? Their 5-year plan, their direction setting, they're the decision makers. The management risk is very, very high in the strat plan process. Make a couple of bad calls there, your strategy's off, and you can really, be out of whack for a while. And the cost of this forecast is high. It's probably more than top manager just coming up with a number, So, it's more than that. Level of aggregation, usually when we're talking about this, we're talking about like maybe 1 or 2 numbers. Like we're going to plan so many $1 million of sales per this time period. Frequency is going to be annual, horizon is going to be years, so we talked about that. Now your sales and operation planning is a little bit lower level plan, and at executive involvement, they're going to reconcile all the functional plans. So remember, sales and operation planning needs everybody's input. You need sales and marketing, you need human resources, you need everybody's input. So production, sales, just everybody. So they're going to reconcile functional plans that disagree. Management risks are medium, cost of forecast medium. You're going to forecast based on product family here. So we're not going to be doing end items, but we're going to do families. And we're going to talk about monthly or quarterly forecasts. And it's going to be several months or more, up to a year. So usually the way people do their sales and operation planning, they'll do like monthly buckets, and maybe up for a year they'll do those monthly buckets. So now your master production scheduling and control the lower level. Executive involvement just for exceptions when you have problems. Management risk is low, cost is low, and they're going to be end items, so at the very end item of the parts, the smallest level. Weekly frequency, could be 2 weeks. Some people use from 2 weeks. And horizon goes on for weeks instead of years for that. So that's the forecasting framework. At the strat plan level, we got decisions, why are you doing this plan? Well, you're doing it for planning purposes, so you can plan capital expansion if you need new product lines, mergers, acquisitions, high-level stuff at the strat and business plan. Output's going to be, total sales, maybe like one number, or output in like for us it'd be the number of hats, 2.2 million hats. That's a number we've used in the past. Forecast inputs, you're going to use competition, economy, demographics, and techniques you're going to use. It's going to be more qualitative, but you may have some math behind it, quantitative methods. You have mostly expert opinion, but you could have some regression, causal analysis, that kind of stuff in there. So, sales and operations planning. Now we're talking about mid-level planning. Forecasting is going to be, your resource plan, your logistics plan, financial plan, those kind of things. And output's going to be family sales. That's what it's going to be. And inputs are going to be stuff like historical data, maybe a Salesforce query, customer relationship management data. And if you have a promotion or pricing coming up, something unusual, those should be in those plans also. So, techniques, you might use a Salesforce composite. That's where your salespeople come up with their estimates and you aggregate all those into one big forecast. You might use a pyramid, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. Causal analysis means linear regression. You're trying to develop a relationship between two different factors. We'll talk about that in detail, so don't worry about that right now. Or just a management estimation. So, now, at the lower levels of master scheduling and control, what kind of decisions are you supporting? MPS, your rough cut capacity plan, your schedule control, and you're going to be looking at finished products or components. So we're looking at end items here, and you're going to be working through the production plan. You're going to look at time series data, which we'll talk about. That's just mathematical analysis of numbers. So we'll get it here in a few minutes, and we could use stuff like exponential smoothing, averages, mathematical techniques. That's more of a routine type forecast. Remember, it's low cost, and it's on a weekly basis. So that's what we're looking at here. Now let's jump into pyramid forecasting, and it's what you do is you roll your forecast up, and then the management will take a look at it, and it'll push it back down. So the best way to look at that is you start out at the small level. You start out like at forecasting end items, then you go up to families, then you go up to one number. Then management pushes it back down back to individual product units and dollars. So you look at the example in the book, and in this example you've got two products. You got product A and B, and you'll see the unit costs are $10 for A1, $20 for A2, $20 for B1, and $10 for B2. And you'll see here at the product level, the end item level, you'll see you got two products, and there's 40 units and 20 units. So you got 40 times 10 is $400 for A1, and you got 20 times 20 is $400 for A2. So you add those two together, and you'll see you get your 800 at 60 units, and that's for A. For B, you do the same exact thing. You total up your B1 is $20 per unit, and that's times 20 units, and that's 400, and you got $10 at B2 times 20 is 200. So you got 600 at the family level and 40 units. So you add everything together and you come up with 1,400. So you take this to management and say, hey, we've got $1,400 for this, and they come back and they say, well, the business forecast is 1960. We've got to try to reconcile these plans and make them match up together. And they say, well, if you look at the next slide, you'll see, well, management's idea is, well, how about 1680? That's what we think it is. So you take that 1680 and then you push it back down, and you'll see how they do that. They fill in the blanks here. So 1680 divided by 1400 is 1.2. So you take the 1.2 times all the units below, and you add up all the numbers, and you come up. So you use that 1680 divided by 1400 as your multiplier, 1.2, and you go through and you multiply your dollars, and you come back up with the total. So I'll post that solution for you, and I hope you guys you can go through it. It's just simple. You roll it up and then you push it back down. Management pushes it down. So it's as simple as that. Now, managing the forecast, you got to have a person who's in charge of the forecast. You got to have some kind of accountability. When I was a forecaster, I was in charge. If there was a mistake, it was mine. I mean, you had to own it. Other places I worked at, someone will say, "Hey, the sales guys do it." Some, management. So there's a lot of, trading hands on that. But there should be someone who's accountable, and you have to determine the forecast horizon and interval. Now, the forecast horizon is the length of the forecast, and the interval is how many times you're going to do the forecast. Maybe you have a 12-month horizon, which is pretty common, and you'll have a monthly interval. So you do a monthly forecasting. Selection of forecast models is important, and also your forecasting process. So your people, data, and software. People are the most important. You got to have the right software and access to relevant data. When I joined Bullard, I was trying to come in, and we didn't have a forecast, materials forecast, and one thing that we didn't have was any historical data. So, I've acquired 13 years of historical data now on our parts, and unfortunately we went to a new ERP system, so that data just got canceled. But that's part of it. I had 13 years of good data by parts, and it really helps. So the software selection, accountability, one set of numbers. It's the biggest thing I've ever seen in forecasting. Everybody wants to have a number you build toward, and they want that forecast to be really high, and they want a number that like a sales plan that they're telling their management they want that to be really low, right? Because they want to kind of sandbag a little bit. But that everywhere I've been, that's always one of the biggest obstacles. Put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to forecast something, you can't have us build a lot more than your forecast. It's just not fair to do it that way. But everybody tries it. It's just part of sandbagging and the way things are. So forecast horizon, it depends on what you're using. Strat plans, 5 years. Sales and operation, maybe a year. Master scheduling, really small, And it depends on the detail needed. Interval, it could be weekly, monthly, and quarterly. It depends on the plan. So usually monthly buckets is what people go with. Did you make your month at the end of the month end? It's the most common I've seen. If you're a publicly traded company, quarterly is really important. So the book goes on, talks about selection of forecast modules or models. So you got they've got this little coefficient of variation. You got standard deviation over the average demand. So it's just a mathematical formula that tells you how volatile your numbers are, right? If you've got really irregular demand, you're going to have a high coefficient of variation. If you've got really nice stable demand, you're going to have a lower coefficient of variation. So they've got a little table here. You look at 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you look at 4 first, you're going to have a low variance and high demand. Hey, that's a great situation. But you got low variance, demand's very stable, and you got high demand. So you can use mathematical techniques, right? It's kind of routine. Mathematical techniques are looking at probably historical numbers, and bam, you've got a forecast piece of cake, right? Number 3, you've got low variance and low demand. That's the worst situation, right? Don't sell that very many of them, but you've got you've got low demand and low variance. So what do? It says maybe consider a make to order, right? You don't want to produce these things based on forecast because you're going to produce the wrong things if there's a lot of variance. So try for a make to order if you can. Number 1, you've got high variance and high demand. So that's really tricky, right? You've got big demand, high variance. You might want to do more customer planning. We're going to talk about collaborative forecasting later on in this section. Maybe a symbol order, right? That's what we do. We've got irregular demand in that way, and a symbol order is a good way to do it. And 2, you got high variance and low demand. So, oh my gosh, that's terrible, right? High variance and low demand. So, what are you going to do? You might have high inventory. Consider make to only again. It's a really tough environment to be in. So anyway, next slide talks about forecasting process. The main thing to pick up here is, and being a professional forecaster, I know that you spit out. The computer might spit out some numbers, maybe a mathematical model spit out some numbers. You look at them, you sift through them. Do they make sense? You generate the forecast, and you reconcile. You look at them, you might show them to some other people. What do you think? Then you move again. You do another. You might recalculate. And then you do it again, or you look at it again and say, hey, does this make sense now? Let's look at all the numbers, add them up. Does that make sense based on historical patterns? Then you do it again. You keep doing it. They've got 8 steps in this forecasting process, but what you just got to know is it's not a one-step process. You just have to keep generating it. And when I was forecasting, I mean, it's not uncommon for me to do. Just keep doing it. It seemed like forever until we got the right numbers and it made sense to everybody. So, part of being a forecaster too is developing consensus with other people. If you're just forecasting wild card stuff out there, then it's going to create a lot of problems, and people aren't going to want to go by your forecast. So, the next chart is forecasting perspective. It's a problem 2.2. Just look at this chart for a second. You'll see the total market, and you'll see a company's share in the market, and you'll see it. The company share, the blue dotted line, kind of follows the market for a while. Then in year 3 on up to year 4, they jump, and the market stays, pretty much the same. So you're making some pretty good gains there. Then you go on up, and you kind of muddle along for the next few years. The market's growing far faster than your market share. So the book asks some questions about that. What would explain Company A's market share until year 3? It just says, that Market A just kind of moved with the market. Company A just moved with the market. They probably weren't the industry leader. They may be a little bit slower than someone else. And then it asks what phase of the market life cycle is the product in. And it appears to be growing, right? The total market's growing, so it's a growth stage. And it says, how has A performed recently? A has not done as good as the market, right? So in year 3, it did really, really good. It blew up, but the last year or two, recently, It says, if you were the CEO, what action would you take in the 18th month forecast, beginning of 4? Well, you try to figure out, we were doing great, and we kind of leveled off a little bit compared to market. Do we need new products? What happened here? Is this a trend? Is it just a blip in the market? So these are the kind of questions CEO might ask here. So anyway, so that's the first half of what we want to do. I don't want to kill you guys with just some video lecture. I know your time's valuable, but that's the first half. I will make another video, and we'll talk about the second half, forecasting techniques. And this video's got a lot of math problems. You want to bring your calculator to this section. Just to sum up a few general concepts about forecasting in the Apex world is you don't want to forecast if you don't have to. You only forecast independent demand. So I don't even know if the book says it, but this is a question I see over and over again. You want to forecast independent demand. You want to forecast service parts. You don't want to forecast dependent demand. And what I mean by dependent demand, you don't want to forecast component parts. They can be calculated. I've seen that over and over again on a couple of exams, so questions too. You'll probably see it. If it's not in these questions, it'll probably be in some other ones you see. So anyway, so you don't want to forecast. And one thing that this is kind of confusing to a lot of people, I don't know if I mentioned yet, forecasting, the higher level you forecast it, it's easier to do. So you want to forecast at a high level, and then down to the component part level, you try to flow the forecast. So example I always want to use, maybe like UK basketball. You can kind of go into the year and you say, well, Kentucky's going to be, say, I don't know, 35-5. Just say they'll be 35-5. You may not know exactly what games they're going to lose. About half of them, for sure. But at the highest level, you can get real close, but it's hard individually to do. That UK football the same way, but and parts are the same way too. You can get close if you're going to forecast the whole company. It's a lot easier to forecast the whole company sale. I bet you guys can probably forecast your company sales, Stober's sales, a lot closer than you can the individual parts. So that's another theme that from forecasting over and over again. So, and guys, I think that's about it for this video right here. Thanks for hanging in with me. I know it's a little bit long, but we will. I'll make another video with the second half of this course, and bring your calculators, and hope things are going well. And we'll see you soon. Bye.